Hello, and I'm Brian, and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, and tonight or today, we are dealing with a debate review. We're going to be responding to Eric's been a little bit since I did debate review. We're responding to Erica's arguments today in her debate with Dr. Jerry Bergman. Here in On Apologetics 101, we've got Dr. Jerry Bergman himself, as well as Dr. Peter Line. Both of them, along with me, are going to be responding to Erika from Gutsick Gibbon on her debate with Dr. Jerry Bergman on Standing for Truth YouTube channel. And without further ado, let's dive in. Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, and we're here today with my guests in the studio, Dr. Peter Line and Dr. Jerry Bergman. And we're here today to discuss actually a debate that Dr. Jerry Bergman had with Erika from Gutsick Gibbon. Um, how you guys doing today? I know we had a late start and we had some technical difficulties there, and how y'all doing today? I mean, y'all doing pretty good or all right or so?
Doing fine, just overcommitted, that's all. But anyways, no
Right,
problem.
and I'm doing good here too. Yep.
All right. Do y'all want to give like real quickly a brief introduction? I know you've been on my channel many times, so just kind of a quick overview of who you are and your background and that sort of thing.
Uh, Jerry can go first if he wants.
Yeah, sure. I taught at
Yeah,
college
yeah.
level for 40 years, taught biology and a variety of other courses, genetics, and been involved in the whole creation business for 50 years now, I guess. And I find my wife wonders why I'm spending so much time in this area, but I guess I find it really rewarding when the questions that come up, I can do a literature search and I can verbally answer them in favor of the creation worldview. And so, therefore, I just find there's so many questions that are. My cough's starting to come up. Let me get some gum. My interest is in science, of course, and since I taught biology and anatomy and physiology for many years, I naturally look at evidence that evolution is put forth to demonstrate, to argue for their worldview. So that's me. I've got over 2,000 publications now, and I have 60 books. I should have 3 more coming out this year, but
And you
going
also
through
have
there.
9 degrees, don't you?
Pardon?
You also have like 9 degrees too.
I have 9 degrees. Spent much of my life in school. I enjoy school,
And
and most of it I didn't have to pay for. I applied for grants and invariably got them. So it was paid for by other people. So figured, well, I might as well take advantage of the
right,
grants. And I have 3
I'm
degrees from
fixing.
medical school. And I like medicine because it's an application of science. We're not talking about theory or ideas or speculation. We're talking about how this information can help in the long run people. So
Right,
therefore, I have an interest in that area.
I'm fixing to go back to college soon. Dr. Peter Line, do you want to give a brief introduction of yourself as well?
Yeah, I've got a doctorate and master's in neuroscience, looking at brain electrophysiology, basically putting electrodes on the head and recording it, and then crunching the data, analyzing it, and things like that. So I spent over a decade in that sort of research, and then I worked at sort of teaching, well, recruited into teaching at a university, a secular university, in the area of biomedical science. So sort of anatomy and physiology related stuff. So I've done that for over a decade as well, and I've had an interest in this issue because it was sort of the way evolution was a stumbling block to me believing in God, because I believe in that in truth. So I didn't want to waste my life believing in God if his word wasn't true. And he kind of answered. I asked God a question once about this issue, and he answered me in a way I won't go into, but he answered me, and then through other circumstances I became a Christian. And but this has been an important issue to me, and that's why I'm in it. And I think the hominid fossils are, to me, it's a propaganda value. As I've talked to you before, I said fossils are fickle. They can sing any song you want, and so you can make up any stories. So it's hard to prove or disprove evolution or creation using these fossils. For that, you go into the brain, or you go into the molecular biology, genetics, or the biochemistry, and you show the almost infinite functional complexity of the human body, or things like that, or in life itself. But this is
You're
uh,
also
the evolution is focused on this, and it's interesting stuff. So I try to put out an alternate explanation of things that aligns with the Bible, and so yeah,
you-
because I
right.
remember once seeing in the
You're also
library.
a neuro.
Sorry.
Oh, I was saying you also a neuroscientist, right?
Yeah, I said
You
I got a.
deal with the
Well, yeah,
brain.
I yeah I did. Yeah, I said at the start I got a doctorate in a master's degree and PhD in neuroscience, uh, and stuff like that. Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Some stuff on brains or brain sizes are going to come up later in the video. Today we're going to play the opening case for Erika's video. We're not going to like do the whole video. We're just going to be doing the opening case. I was originally going to do this as a kind of a series, and I decided, no, most of what Erika argued for is in the opening case anyhow. So we're just going to just do the opening case, and then call it a wrap from that point. So if you guys are ready, we'll jump right into the video.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Correct. My timer started. Okay, folks, I'm going to be supporting the affirmative today, right? I'm here to say and to present the case that hominid fossil record demonstrably supports evolution, and I'm going to take it a step further and go ahead and say that it also precludes creationism, making that like not a possibility. So,
I guess real quickly. What do y'all think about what she said about evolution precludes creationism? Because I don't even think she even did she even go in that route in her opening case? The rest of her opening case, did she ever establish
I looked,
anything that would go ahead?
I looked at her background, and she was reared in a family that accepted creation. She went to Christian schools until ninth grade. She was taught creation. She believed, she accepted the young earth creation worldview, according to her own testimony. She went to a secular high school and encountered evolution in her biology class in high school. And that converted her and made her somewhat aggressive against the creation worldview, which she once held. And this is not uncommon. You find that you get enough training to accept the creation worldview in elementary school and a Christian school, and then but you don't get a really firm foundation. And then you end up going to high school, college, and learning that a lot of the ideas that you were taught are not supported. To me, this says that our Christian schools are not doing a very good job giving people a firm background in the creation worldview. Because if they did, most of her questions would be answered. So I think somewhat it's a rebellion against what she was raised in, and she bragged that she converted her parents in the evolutionary worldview. Her mother's a nurse, her father is a medical doctor, and again they were convinced by her arguments that indeed that's not the reality. That reality is we evolved. My main concern against her whole presentation is, so what if she's found some ape-like creatures that walk upright. I mean, that doesn't prove evolution. It proves there's more variety in the creation than we expected. I did some research and I found that it's true knuckle walking is the primary mode of locomotion for gorillas. But bipedalism does exist. Gorillas can stand and walk on two legs, but it's not their preferred method of movement. And bipedal behavior is often seen in specific contexts. For example, it's common when gorillas are displaying, carrying an infant, or attempting to see something in the distance. Bipedal walking is also more common among juveniles. Young juveniles are more likely to walk bipedally than adults, much more likely. In fact, juveniles during their play day, during the time they carry someone's infant, or when they're curious, they can walk bipedally very effectively. And so, given the range of variation you find in anatomy, it doesn't surprise me at all, indeed, that some primates, non-human primates, can walk very effectively bipedally. And therefore I thought, well, so what? I mean, that's fine to prove that, but I don't think she did. But on the other hand, I thought, you're going to prove the whole case for human evolution on the basis of a few primates, evidently, which can walk upright bipedally? I just think that's very naive.
Actually, I've been looking into the whole bipedal issue this morning. You actually need a whole like set of features that would require it to be bipedal, like we are. And something else that I found out is that even in the reconstruction of these Australopithecines and Ardipithecus and that sort of thing, they have a cone-shaped rib cage, which is something that the quadrupeds would have because they would lean forward like this. But with us, we have like a barrel-shaped rib cage, and that actually helps with balance, posture, upright movement, center of gravity, all those things. And that's something that we don't actually see in the fossils. You actually have to have all of those features. What they do is they point to a few things that they think are bipedal features, and then they think that this automatically makes it bipedal. But apes actually have foramen magnums in different positions, don't they? In various positions. They're
right.
not exactly in the same spot. So, but we're going to probably talk more about that later because she does bring up that issue. I would love to get Peter's thoughts on it because I know what he's argued for optional bipedalism. I think something that you're basically hinting at there, Jerry, about how they can walk upright in a limited fashion. So we'll get more into that as we're moving forward to that. But Peter, do you have anything to say about what you just said before we move on?
I think we can just move on because we can discuss something next point. Yeah.
Okay.
And
So
looking at
first things first, like what is a hominid? Just in case.
Sorry, Jerry. What?
in looking at history, I have way back 50, 60 years ago, there was primates of various, I can't remember if it was gorillas or chimps, but they walk quite effectively upright. And so they said there's variation. And again, this is older case histories that were written about, but they said there are some chimps that for some reason can walk quite effectively upright. And I didn't know this was so, but you pointed out there are a lot of differences. That's true. We have a number of differences, which makes for effective walking upright. And that's not the debate. But again, we see so much variation in the primate world. I'm not saying she proved her case, but I don't see that that's a central issue in understanding whether or not we evolved from some primitive primate. But anyways, go ahead.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on because we will be getting more into the bipedal issue later.
Everybody's not quite on the same page, but by current and conventional understanding, a hominin is any ape that is more closely related to humans than it is to the panids, so the chimpanzees and bonobos. It's basically any fossil ape that's more closely related to humans than it is to our closest living relative, which is the chimps and the bonobos, as I said previously. And this.
What do you guys think about her definition of hominid? Do you think it's kind of assuming all life is related, the evolutionary presuppositions. Is that your take of her definition of a hominid?
Yeah, well, that's probably pretty much all evolutionists believe, that it's the chimps are the closest. Chimps and humans are the closest living relatives, and they had a common ancestor about 5, 6, 7 million years ago. That's what they believe. So it's the assumption that they make. Yeah. So yeah, that's not a surprise.
What do you think of her?
They make.
Right. What do you think of her definition, Jerry?
Oh, I think it's appropriate. I mean, she's trying to define something that's not easy to define, and she's, I guess, got to come up with something. But if you look at the whole evolutionary assumption, we're talking about a continuum from a chimp, or our common ancestor, and our common ancestor to chimps and humans, and so you're looking at gradations, and like she's trying to draw, I think, a division between those gradations, which is, to some degree, compromising her position. Technically, if she's correct, you're going to find our common ancestor slow changes to modern humans, and there won't be any clear demarcation between the common ancestor and humans, and from the evolutionary assumption. But so she, I guess, to some degree, is admitting there is a demarcation, and that supports our view.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on.
Group is going to include apes in the genera like Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, Paranthropus, Homo, and many more. And if you don't know what any of those are, don't worry, because I'm going to tell you. So I'm going to pull a line from Ken Ham here, the classic. Actually, this goes all the way back to George McCready Price. We're working with the same data here, right? The hominin fossils exist whether we like it or not. And we've got these opposing hypotheses that Donnie sort of outlined at the beginning. So how are we going?
Interesting enough, when Ken Ham uses that phrase, he's referring to how we interpret the evidence. So she missed that part of it. Did y'all hear me?
Who took it. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure who you're wanting to answer. But yeah,
It doesn't matter. Whoever wants to go.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if it, yeah. Well, it's all about interpretation, isn't it? That's the whole thing. And when she presented, she gave her interpretation, or the evolutionary spin on the evidence, and of course, it's going to support her view, but it may not be. The evidence presented may not be the way the evidence is in reality. And you put a spin on something, like I said, bones can sing any song you want. They're fickle. So basically, she puts a spin on it, and someone else can come and give a totally different interpretation of the same evidence. And we also have to look at some of the fossils that, I don't want to take too much time on it, but some of the fossils that certainly have been used in the past that have fallen. Well, may not admit it, but like the 1470 skull, that was one of the main propaganda piece of evolution. Its face, I don't know how correct this is, but initially the face was really vertically reconstructed, and then but one of the people involved in it, the late Alan Walker, he disagreed with it. He believed it was more prognathous, projecting out, and it was basically everything else about it was Australopithecine. He called it a big brain Australopithecine. And then later, Bromwich and that Timothy Bromwich group did a virtual reconstruction of it, made it more prognathous, and then they got sort of came around to a value of 600. It used to be 752 cubic centimeters per Holloway. They got 625 cubic centimeters, but then they say to maybe 700. And then I saw in Carl Werner's book, they showed an evolutionist basically putting an endocast from a robust Australopithecine, which had a cranial capacity of 530 cubic centimeters. The endocast fitted neatly within the 1470 inside of the 1470 skull. They had a a cast of it, you put it in. So basically, it's not even a big brain Australopithecine; it's just an Australopithecine now. So that is no longer, so that sums up, Homo habilis. It's a phantom species. Basically, nearly all of it, even that some evolutionists would put all of it in the Australopithecines or some separate genus. And so that's not a link. You have Australopithecines, and then you have in humans and Erectus are regarded as humans, and you have a big gulf there morphologically. Even though some Australopithecines can walk upright, I believe, better than chimps and things, and guide the sign variability. Like I don't see them as ape, I see them as an extinct apish primate group. And there's a difference, a bit like monkeys are not apes either. You have these extinct group of primates, but there's a world of difference between them and humans, the way humans walk. And I think the intelligent design movement is some calculations on what it would take from Australopithecine to walk like Erectus, endurance running and stuff like that. And it's basically impossible if you do the probability. So there's a lot of things about these fossils that they don't tell you, and a lot of other things. But I just thought I'd make the point of the 1470 skull, because that's been used so much to propaganda to push evolution, and it was almost deliberately reconstructed to make the face more vertical, more human, and so that would make the brain case larger. But now it's no longer, and that's the way a lot of these things go. But unfortunately, it takes time before the true status is revealed, so yeah.
Another thing I had on the problem with Erika is that what she would do is, okay, because a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these fossils are being reconstructed. Like the hip, for example, in Ardipithecus that you brought up was actually was found crushed in like over 50 pieces, I heard or read. And it had to be reconstructed again, and it was reconstructed using some kind of software, but they were basing it on modern human anatomy and modern, apes and assumed evolutionary presuppositions as far as transitionals and that sort of thing. And so it's like, okay, a lot of interpretation went into that reconstruction, and what she's doing is she's asserting that it's true based on the reconstruction process, based on these evolutionary presuppositions and interpretations. And on top of that, they modeled this after modern apes and modern human anatomy, and assumed transitional bipedalism and things like that, with the skull and that sort of thing. So it's like, how much can we really trust these reconstructions, given the fact that they're going to be based heavily on these presuppositions? Dr. Jerry Bergman, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, that's very well put out. Unfortunately, evolutionists look at the world through their evolutionary glasses, and they tend to see things according to their worldview. Of course, we do the same thing, but we have the advantage, I guess. My background is I was an evolutionist, and therefore I looked at the world through evolutionary glasses. But as I learned more and more, I found I had to take those glasses off and look at the world the way it is. And and another thing I think you hinted at is that so many of these are a lot of skull or fragments, and the fragments have to be put together. And generally, especially the skull is often crushed. And they think animals and other animals primarily would break the skull and eat the brains and so on. And so therefore they're crushed, and therefore they have to put them together. And occasionally you've got a few skulls, you have most of the pieces, but most you don't. But one thing I've noticed is we have something like 6,000 different evidence of 6,000 different creatures. And as they get more and more, what we find is not a continuum, not the so-called progression as is common in the media, but we find basically there are groups. In this slide I have in front of me, you've got the Homo group, and you've got 12 fossils in the Homo group, which have been classified in that group. And then you have the Ardipithecus group, which you have 4 fossils in that group, and the Paranthropus group, which you have 3 fossils in, and then the Australopithecus group, which you have 4. And what what I see happening is that as we get more and more fossils, they're not put in a continuum, but they're put in these groups. And so we have more and more fossils in each group. So it's my prediction that as we discover more fossils, we're going to find at least 4 distinct groups, and we are going to find it difficult to find transitions from one group to another, as they've already found. And so I have friends that are evolutionists, and they accept this. They still believe in evolution, but they say, yeah, it's becoming more difficult for us to accept the evolutionary worldview because we just don't see the fine gradations we should. What we see is, well, in this case, we see 4 different primates, human-like primates, and as we find out more, they fill gaps not between them as they should, but within the family. In the Ardipithecus group, for example, you get more and more in that group, and therefore you have more information about that group and less information about the transitional forms from one group to another. So as I've stressed, evolution is going to be proved wrong by evolutionists themselves. And they're doing a good job proving evolution wrong. A very good job. And this is just, I think, another example.
Right. Dr. Lyon, do you have anything to say about the way in which people are interpreting these fossils and reconstructing them?
Yeah, I guess the one thing on the groups, I think the one mistake creationists make it is, and I've heard it time, and I think it's caused a lot of problems, and even with the interpretation, is that assume that when evolutionists, some of the top evolutionists, particularly say human or homo, they're talking about descendants of Adam and Eve. A lot of them will refer to anything in the genus Homo as human, and if creationists assume that everything in the genus Homo is human, then you'll never be able to separate it from the Australopithecine, because a lot of the specimens in there classified as Homo habilis actually don't belong in Homo. They're Australopithecines or some separate genus, and that's the problem you have. I was reading about the Littlefoot skull the other day, and I saw Ronald Clark putting in STW 53. That's in a skull that's been signed to Homo habilis. He's putting it into Australopithecines. The same with OH24 into Australopithecines. The postcranial skeleton OH62 into the Australopithecines. Well, it was just as ape-like as Lucy, or worse anyhow. So, and some put the whole thing in there. There may be some odd erectus in there, but that's about it. So that's a big mistake, and because a lot of creations just say Homo, the group Homo, but they think Homo. If they mean Homo habilis, then you have a problem, because a lot of those aren't human, and they are just like the Australopithecines, and so you have to people have to be aware of this, and and not sort of use Homo habilis as part of put that in humankind. That I would totally disagree with, because some of these fossils don't belong there, and I think that's a problem. There's just and I think it leads to problems like people interpreting Lucy as a human pygmy and stuff like that, misinterpreting what evolutionists say, and that's the problem. So I just wanted to point that out.
Right, and I was actually thinking about that earlier, about how they take like the word like homo and hominid, and they just and because evolutionists assume relationship between us and apes, they just kind of put things that are not human in those categories, and vice versa. And it's like, okay, that's not even classified as that way. So these terms kind of can be very, very loaded, and so we have to be careful that not everything that's one of the reasons why I was sitting there asking about the definition that Erika gives for hominid, because not just because they use the words hominid or homo don't necessarily mean they mean exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. See, in their definition, a human being would also be a hominid in their definition. We're a hominid, but when they or hominin, but when they talk about hominins, they usually not talk about modern humans, but with that would be part of the definition, because we're descended from we're on the human side of the common ancestor, so we'd be included as a hominin. But when they talk about hominins, they're not really generally talking about modern humans. They're talking about the supposed in between stages from the common ancestor between us, supposedly us and chimps, and modern humans. But hominins would be part of that group as well. Humans would be part of hominins in their classification, but in our classification, when we hear evolution talk about hominins, we generally don't assume they're talking about modern humans, but they could be. But it's all a bit of a, yeah, you just have to be careful about the terms. Everything can be loaded when evolutionists use them, and how the context, I think, is important.
Yeah, that's a good point. This
Right.
chart I'm
All right.
having in front of me, they have the homo group, but really they need the homo group and then us in another part of the tree. But I'm surprised even the evolutionists have a lot closer to what we accept than the traditional progression from ape to human. So they're moving in the right direction, at least according to this diagram, and several others, by the way, that show pretty much the same thing. I've got like 4 diagrams I found done by mainline evolutionists who show basically the groups. We have 4 groups, and we don't have the continuum, which is our main concern is a continuum.
Yeah, I think if you generally speaking, if you got rid of Homo habilis and the ones that we call the really early Homo, which are sort of Australopithecus-like, if you take them out of the genus Homo, then the genus Homo would mostly consist of what is human, whether they're pathological or not. I mean, there's some there's pathology or not, but I think Homo habilis, that's the dubious group, and that's what causes the problem, because some of them aren't human, and so and evolution has sort of made Homo habilis. They wanted a link between Australopithecines and basically Erectus or humans or something like that, and that was habilis, but it's a phantom species, and that's what one just has to call that out, and then you can see there's a bigger gulf there. But if you have Homo habilis there, then it's very hard. And as you can see, a 1470 man, that was falsely reconstructed. The face, the brain capacity larger, and the person who was part of the reconstruction today, Dr. Alan Walker, he believed it's just a big brain Australopithecine, and later it's shown the brain wasn't that large anyhow. So that's gone, and most of that, and that would easily fit within. It's been compared to the I think Kenyanthropus platypus, which is another specimen which basically probably doesn't need its own genus. It's probably a variation of Afarensis, like a lot of them, like Australopithecus anamensis is probably also a variation of Afarensis. So even a lot of the Australopithecines, that they show variety, but how many species are there? There's probably a lot of species that can be merged into one. There's a lot of variety in them.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on. Unless y'all got anything else to add.
No, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
Going to interpret them. How would conventional science interpret these hominid fossils as opposed to creationism, or in particular, young Earth creationism? So evolutionary theory would say that humans descend from more basal or more primitive apes. The hypothesis most specifically would be fossil hominins are all close human relatives. Humans are thus apes, which have acquired our human-specific characteristics as we evolved from more basal or primitive apes over geologic time. Basically, we should see transitional species, right? And this makes 3 very specific predictions. The first one is that humans will have the morphologic or physical characteristics of apes, and that we will also have the physical characteristics of successively higher groups, or successively, higher groups. So things like we'll have the characteristics of not just apes, but also of anthropoid primates and primates generally, and mammals and chordates, and so on and so forth. We'll also...
What do you guys think of her I don't know how I should put this. Her defining of her position on transitionals. Um, she said you should see that of higher groups. Is she talking about like variations within uh, um, like Australopithecines, and that they would get like elevated stuff as time goes on? And it sounds like she's saying that if I see anything that I think is remotely similar to humans, then I'm going to interpret that as a transitional. Is that how you guys are understanding that?
Yeah, I think so. I think she has the evolutionary worldview, and she's obviously looking for Ardipithecus that have some traits like modern humans, or at least moving in that direction. So she's not giving any evidence. She's just saying that's what she expects. So that's her claim.
Right. Which is, I guess, is supposed to set up what she is trying to prove during her opening case, because she's trying to argue for like, hey, because there was actually a point in the discussion, and you could tell me, Dr. Bergman, if this is your take as well. It almost seemed like she was equating bipedalism to humanity, like if she if she could prove that it was bipedal, then she could prove it's transitional to human or something of that nature. Did you get that impression? Like she seemed to be equating being bipedal with being human?
More human. Yeah, I think she is. But of course, she's claiming that they're highly effectively bipedal and not just, like baby primates. They're commonly bipedal, but not very effectively. You brought out the rib cage and so on. The brain design is a little bit different to accommodate the eyes and so on. So it can move forward and the head can be tilted in such a direction they can see in front of them. For humans, of course, we have not just a bipedal design, but also the body as a whole is designed to walk upright, balance appropriately.
Peter, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just I think the bipedalism issue, the most bipedal ape is not the chimps or the gorilla, it's actually the gibbon. And like I think I played the other day on some other channel, you see a gibbon running probably faster than a lot of people can run, walking upright more. It has a more upright posture than any of the other apes, and no one would mistake that for an ape man. And according to some evolutionists, it has more the posture of its body, the lumbar region, long lumbar region, and things like that, is more suited to bipedalism than the chimps. And it is much more, and it does practice more bipedalism than chimps and things like that. Mainly a lot in the trees, but if on the ground it can run, and so and its foramen magnum is not moved forward, yet it has a bigger head size ratio to body size than I think a lot of the apes or humans, but it still does very well walking bipedally without having a forward placed foramen magnum. So I don't know how people put too much weight on things like that. But it's also the problem of evolutionists is bipedalism in their timeline. There's an ape. I don't know. I always have problems pronouncing it, but got a slide on it. But there's I forget the name of the thing. Maybe I don't want to pronounce it wrongly. So where and just see if I have it. If I can find it anywhere here. Is the name. It's not one of them is Oropithecus bambuli, but there's another one, more recent one. I'll just see if I can find it. It's hard to find it. Anyhow, it was an ape. I think it was an ape that they believe was habitually bipedal, and it was existed in their timeline 11, 12 million years ago. And so that's from Europe. I got a slide on it, but maybe I don't want to complicate things putting on it. It starts with Dawn something, but I forget the name, and it's difficult pronunciation of the name, so I won't say. But I present it somewhere else, but I have slides on it. But so anyhow, there was these, and like with Oripithecus bambouli, when that came out a few decades ago, and those indicated features, some features even similar to afarensis, that was the get out of jail card was well, it involved these bipedal features independently. That's the sort of what generally happens if I can't explain something, and then it's independent evolution. But the thing is, a hominin bipedalism doesn't equate hominin. Even if you use their data, if they were habitual or obligatory hominins, or not hominins, apes that walked obligatory bipedally, according to them, millions of years before the first supposed hominin or ape man, then you can't use this as a defining feature. Because why if the Australopithecines walked upright, say they did walk obligatory upright, why are they ape men and these other ones are not? That's the question. But as I outline elsewhere, the pelvis, the pelvis of the Australopithecines, it is more superficial. You look at it, it's more human-like because it has a much taller. The chimps have a much taller hip bone, so it does look. But if you go in and assume, you find there are problems with it. Why it may not have been that efficient at it. For one thing, they were good at climbing trees, so that immediately that raises a question. But also the centrum, the body of the sacrum, which bears a load from the spine and carries the upper body, is very small, and it's small in Lucy. It's even smaller in Sediba, and it's small in one of the Africana specimens, where the ones which haven't got a skull, and a little bit larger, slightly larger in another one. But so these are issues, and then there's other things with the flaring ilia and things like that, and different, and there's a range of issue I presented on another channel about a week or so ago. So it's not, the pelvis isn't human because it has a lot of other features that even evolutionists point out isn't in human pelvises. But so you have these creatures which Charles Oxnard believed were unique, not related to humans or apes. They were kind of equidistant, or even further from humans than chimps are, or African apes are. But anyhow, so and the thing is, I had a pelvis that with the hip bones are a bit shorter, and people go into all sorts of panic about it. Well, I don't think it's a big deal. That if they walk upright, I believe they walked upright more suited to chimps are, but so do gibbons. They walk upright a lot better than chimps too. So me, it's not a big deal. But if you look at their skulls, these were not humans. In fact, if you go on their theories and say the foramen magnum and the bicondylar angle of the femur, the way it angles in, the robust Australopithecines would be the best bipedalists, better than humans, because their foramen magnum is further forward than humans, and their bicondylar angles is about. I think they found one just recently. It was only a 1 meter tall creature. It had bicondylar angles. I think it was 17.8 degrees, nearly 18 degrees. The humans, it's about 8 to 11 degrees, or around 11 degrees, or whatever, 10, 11 degrees. So it was sort of hyper vagus, or probably knock knees. So I don't know whether that made it that efficient at walking upright, but it's just different. God designs variability, and it's a package. If God creates variability, then you'd expect it creates a variability in the skull, and that would include a foramen magnum. But I don't see why on earth why that means they're on the way to becoming human, and particularly look at the robust Australopithecines. They look like some alien creature, not anything human like at all. If you look at some of the skulls, and so yeah, but evolution, that's all they got, and so they really labor on it, but one shouldn't fall for the bait.
Right.
Oh,
One of the
all well done.
arguments that right.
Well done,
One of
Peter.
the arguments that I know that Erika does is that she'll try to argue that that the foramen magnum is like in between, and that's transitional. But apes also have it variation like that. So what do you think of
Yeah,
that, Jerry or Peter?
Yeah, that's true. They do. You can look at, when you compare primates, you find that there is quite a bit of variation, and you find living primates, you find some that are not all that different than humans. Location of foramen magnum. So that's
And plus,
good point.
right, and if you only have some of the features of bipedalism, that's, to me, that's no different than modern day primates, because they're going to have some features because they have to be able to stand upright. They carry food in their hands. But you look at the Australopithecines, and something that I think Peter also hinted at, where you got some ape-like features or some arboreal tree type features where they clearly are tree climbers. Like, for example, the curved fingers, the phalanges on the fingers and the curve, and the longer arms. These things are designed obviously to be able to travel in trees and things like that. And so, why would it have those features, but yet you argue, well, yeah, but it's got a vagus knee. You think there's a nearly interior forward magnum. Or a framing magnum, and that sort of thing. And all that would mean is that, yeah, it could stand upright a little bit better than modern day primates, but it wouldn't mean it could walk like us. And clearly, it has evidence of tree dwelling, that it's able to swing from trees. It's walking on knuckles, things like that. And so it's not in an unlimited sense anyhow. Um, but the issue there with what she's trying to pull, it sounds almost like if she's saying that if it's bipedal, then it's on its way becoming human, and that's just not true. And I think that's what you guys are pointing out, that bipedalism does not equal humanity. Birds are bipedal, ain't they?
Yeah,
I think
a lot of
that
that are. A lot of reptiles are. Yeah, a lot of
Right.
birds would be, of course. They would not
I
make.
think
There were
it's
also dinosaurs. There are dinosaurs that were bipedal.
I think also I was just looking up in here the thing of so it's been pointed out that many animals such as kangaroos, giraffes, camels, llamas, antelopes, birds, and even some dinosaurs habitually support a progmathic head on an erect spine for most of the time. But looking at data, this is a textbook on or human evolutionary anatomy, and here they show here the diagrams and data, and basically the Australopithecus africanus and the Paranthropus boisei, which is a robust Australopithecines, therefore Magnon is more anterior by their methods, by aligning it with how it compares to the bitympanic line, which is sort of lines up with the tympanic cavity and ear canal. And they show that Africanus is more forward and robust, even more forward than than Homo sapiens. And so you have this, and some of the other so-called Homo habilis ones and things like that, and erectus. So it's kind of unclear why would some of these Australopithecines be more forward than the human ones if it was going in a continuum, if it was increasing per time. It's like a dog's breakfast. And I think that there's more design and God's variability, including in that design. It comes as a package, but there's variability in it, and there's no. So there's a lot of iffy things in that. Even the Sahelanthropus giganteus, I think you mentioned that earlier. I suppose the first one, there's a lot of disagreement that, because I think I had a quote here. So that's supposed to be the first hominid, and this is from Langdon, Human Evolution. He says that, talking about the Sahelanthropus giganteus, I think you both know the Tumo skull. It says the forearm magnet arguably lies more anterior than would be usual for apes, suggesting an upright posture, but its position must be reconstructed from damaged bone and lies within the range of variation of both hominins and bonobos. So bonobos are sort of the chimp cousins of chimps, basically. So there's a lot of things there, and also they've found the femurs argued that may not indicate that it was bipedal. So there's a lot of confusion there, and you can and if the forearm magnet lies within the variability of bonobos, then that's existing apes, isn't it? So a lot of this stuff, like so you get, they made a big thing when this Tumo skull come out. There was a big evolutionist find ever, and then it turns out it's just an ape. So that's what usually happens, but the damage is done, isn't it? And then it's still in a text. It'll be in a textbook for decades to come. A bit like the vestigial organs and stuff like that. Like the phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny, that also the basically embryo, the fake sort of embryos of hackles and stuff like that, that the evolutionary history is replicated in sort of the development. It's still, even when I went into teaching, I saw one of the previous lectures that used that slides of that sort of stuff, that fake theory, and it just shows you how some people who teach the stuff don't have no clue. That's what they just get the notes and that's it. But anyhow.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and move on real quick.
B, prediction 2 or prediction B, genetically most similar to the other apes, to the other hominoids, right? And critically, they should also be most similar to us, right? So it should go both directions. And finally, what we're going to be talking about today, which is the fossil record should demonstrably show the slow emergence of human characteristics from more primitive Miocene apes across geologic time. Now, predictions 1 and 2 are already true, right? And Jerry and I can go through this if we'd like, but humans do have all of the physical characteristics of apes. We have all of the physical characteristics of primates, all the physical characteristics of mammals, right? That's just where we nest. That's just the reality of it. We've known this since Linnaeus invented taxonomy in the 1700s. We're also most genetically similar, though, to other apes. We share 98.8% of our coding DNA with chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, and slightly less than that when we're looking at the entire genome. And this holds with the most recent data, right? So just 2 weeks ago, right, we got the complete sequencing of the ape genomes. This is almost telomere to telomere, and it reflects the same old phylogeny that we've been talking about since the dawn of these kinds of genetic studies back in like 2002. So humans and chimpanzees are one another's closest living relatives. We call them our closest living relatives, and they call us their closest living relatives too.
All right, there's a lot there. All right, I got some stuff to say about the percent similarity and the genome paper, but first of all, let's start with what she started out there in that clip, saying concerning the similarities between us and apes. She's saying that we have all the similarities and basic characteristics. My understanding is that what they do is that they come up with what they think are like similarities between apes and humans, and then they just kind of define what it means to be, or that we have all the what they call synapomorphies, I think it's called. Where we have all the similar traits of apes, and when I look at apes and chimps and primates in general, I don't see that resemblance. aliens. So, what exactly do you guys think they're looking at here?
It's hard to make genetic comparisons because so much is not comparable. And ideally, what they've done in the past is they compare protein producing genes to protein producing genes. And there's so much they just leave out. And I'm not sure when they make these comparisons, they need to detail exactly what they did. I was looking up some data and I found out we're 95% similar to mice, 95%. So 5% difference. And quite a few other comparisons have been made. It's amazing how close we are to many mammals, according to these studies. But any rate, it used to be that 99% similar, and now she's got it down to 98, and some down to 94, 95. So depends on who you consult, and it depends on the differences between one comparison and another. But
Right.
this is limited. Let's assume that 2% difference. And genetically, isn't it incredible that the difference actually is enormous, considering only 2% difference? No one denies that the differences, of course, are enormous. But yet to say that these are just because of 2% differences is a problem. Or amazing that the 2% differences make such a difference.
I actually was one of the major voices in the what I call the Tompkins controversy a while back, concerning the chimp and human similarity. I mean, it just kind of just broke out on YouTube, and because with Erika and everything, and she even brings this up later. She claims that she had replicated Tompkins's method, which is actually false. She did not. She the first batch of experiments that she did. She actually even admitted later. I actually discovered this first, and then Rob Carter had also discovered a program in it that averaged out all of these garbage results that she was getting, and that's why she came up with less than 100% on self to self with allegedly replicating Tompkins's method, which she didn't do. And then she, the second batch of experiments, she actually assumed Glenn Williamson's misrepresentation of Tompkins's study and assumed that he had calculated by dividing by the quarry length, which you're not supposed to do in a local alignment, right? Because the alignment's going to be shorter than the quarry. But that's not what Tompkins did. And I had Tompkins confirmation on that as well. And so she assumed Glenn Williamson's misrepresentation of Tompkins' work, and that's why she ended up getting less than 100% on self to self. It's why she got bogus results and that sort of thing. So she didn't replicate Tompkins' method. But interesting enough, there was a study. Well, before I get into the study, the algorithms that they use to assess these similarities, they only look for similarities. They only look for sameness, the one-to-one agreement. You can have some differences in alignment, but not like a lot. If you have large-scale differences, it just won't align. And so one of the things that creationists argue for. I know Tompkins has argued for this. I've argued for this. And even Richard Buggs, who is not a young Earth creationist, he's a theistic evolutionist, has even argued for this, that there is differences that are not alignable, with these algorithms, and that are not being factored in. And Richard Buggs went and took these unalignable differences and then factored them in around 2018. And this caused all kinds of stir among the evolutionists, because here was an evolutionist who actually took an 85% number. But interesting enough, there was a new study that came out. Erika hinted at it, but I don't know why she thinks this study proves her point. It don't. It actually proved ours.
Is that the British study that was done recently, published in Nature?
Yes. It was published in Nature 2025, complete sequence of ape genomes. Are you familiar with this, Dr. Bergman?
I am. Oh, yeah. I can't cite it word for word, but I'm familiar with the study.
Right. Indeed, 12.5 to 27.3% of an ape genome failed to align or was inconsistent with a simple one-to-one alignment, therefore introducing gaps. That shows that there's actually 12.5% to 27.3% of differences between they evaluated 6 different great apes. One of them was a chimpanzee. I don't know if I know you're not a geneticist, Dr. Line, but are you familiar with the study?
Not that familiar, to be honest. The kind of there's so much stuff to read, and that was relatively recent, so I haven't really. I just heard that the sort of the used to be. There's been a lot of debate about what's the difference between chimps and humans genetically, and there was a 15%, and then we're back to 5%, and now maybe back to more the original 15%.
Yeah.
But it depends on what you compare, whether it's the proteins or the non-protein data. Although the problem is that if most of it, the genome now we know is not junk, so the non-protein data is probably just as important as the protein data because it regulates a lot of things. We just don't know some of its functions.
Right.
So yeah.
So interesting when these differences were factored back in. Like when I did a calculation on this, and I found out that this would put the genomes, at least of those 6 great apes, including the chimpanzee, but with a lower number of like 69% to a 84%. So the lower and upper limit, and it just so happens that Richard Buggs also did a follow-up article, which I'm not going to go into that today because I probably will be doing a video about that here probably soon. But Richard Buggs did do a follow-up video or a follow-up article where he actually assessed their methods and everything. And he said this brings it to like 25% or 85%. And he said that that it could be if I understood the article correctly, that it could be less than that even because that doesn't include this, that doesn't include that. So, but basically, it could actually be even less than that. So this actually would overturn the 96% number. So I'm not entirely certain why Erika. Maybe Erika has not actually had a chance to actually read the paper. Maybe she doesn't know that they actually talk about the differences that we're not aligning in the ape genome. Maybe she just assumed that the presence of this paper would confirm evolutionary ideas. I don't know. But now the writers of the paper did assume evolutionary presuppositions. Of course, they're evolutionists. They probably would not have gotten published in Nature if that wasn't true. But they're evolutionists, and so you could tell they do believe that chimps and humans are closely related and that sort of thing. But and lots of times whenever they saw lots of differences, they assumed a rescue device called rapid evolution. You guys probably heard of that. Like whenever they see there's differences, they say, "Oh well, there must be some kind of rapid evolution going on." So it's just kind of a convenient tag to throw in there whenever there's lots of differences. But my take on this was that this was awesome. I now, of course, do I think that all evolutionists is going to suddenly drop the 96% number? No, I think they're going to hang on to it. I think they're going to fight for it. But this is a step in the right direction. Do you guys agree?
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah, we have 2%, I guess, that we mentioned was codes for protein, and that means have a lot of stuff there. We don't know what it does, and much of it's regulatory, and who knows what the rest of it does. But that's exciting for geneticists to get into what it does. But again, it's hard to compare things that are not comparable, and that's the main problem you have with these studies.
Exactly. And but that right there does factor in because it's kind of like a ratio between the differences and similarities. So it just kind of like you can't because when people hear numbers like 96% similar, what are they thinking? Oh, well, we must be only 4% similar or 4% different. And I've even heard some evolutionists even say we're almost identical And when we look at primates and we look at humans and like, are they seeing something we're not seeing? So how are we almost identical? But go ahead.
96% similarity it means you still have 120 million base pair differences. Now, I don't know how you get that fixated into the genomes in 6 million years. There's just no way, unless it's just random point mutations. But that would just corrupt the genome. You get 100, even that wouldn't work. 100 per point mutations per person per generation into the genome may add up to some million changes, but the problem is that's just random. It's like rust on a car. It'll degrade the genome. So I don't know how you. And isn't there problems with how many you can fixate in a certain amount of time because you get selection interference? You too many. You select for too many things at once. Isn't work. So I don't know how on earth you can get. I think around maybe 1,000 would be the upper limit you could get in 6 million years when the alleged common ancestor for us and chimps. But even if you have 1%, that'd be 30 million base pair differences. And so, and 96 be 120 million. So good luck in, that sort of trying to spin how you get that into the genome, unless it's just random noise. But random noise doesn't do much good for an operating system, and the DNA is just a highly high-tech operating system, and that to me it's impossible.
Right. I tell people from a worldview perspective, it wouldn't matter to me if chimps and humans are 99% or 85% similar, because within the YAC perspective, we can actually justify both similarities and differences. And so it's not really a problem because the differences, the types of differences could be so fundamental. They could prevent hybridization. They could prevent. They could create a clear distinction between us and whatever else you think we're related to. And so I'm not opposed at the idea of us being 99% similar because I'm a YAC and I just have to have it 85% similar. No, my argument is more based on evidence. Obviously, when we look at chimps and humans, there's far more difference that's being ignored as a result, and that's just a commonsensical perspective. Looking into genetics, you get more differences there as well. So I just don't see how someone could sit there and say we're all identical. Hey, I'm pretty sure I don't look like that.
Chimps share more genomically with humans than they do with gorillas, right? So the chimps and the bonobos. But number 3, or C here, we have to investigate tonight. We're going to investigate here the fossil record. So to support human evolution, the hominid fossil record absolutely must display the emergence of the human suite of characteristics over 7 million years of geologic time. From these Miocene apes that are generic, they're not chimps, right? Akembo and Pyrrholopithecus pictured here aren't chimps, but they do share a lot of similarities with modern apes. So we'll put our Miocene apes as kind of our stand-in and switch back and forth a bit between that and chimps. And 7 million years comes from the molecular clock. So we need to see humans emerge from basal apes over 7 million years. Let's see what we see. But in order to chart this emergence, we have to actually know how humans differ from other apes. So I'm going to walk you through those characteristics that we're going to be looking for as we look through the fossil record very quickly now. The first is large brains, right? So I made this in R. This is just a look at the brain case size of 6 different hominoid genera. So we're looking at humans, gorillas, orangutans, chimps and bonobos, siamangs, and regular old gibbons. And what you can obviously see here is humans have huge brains and other apes don't. Even for their body size, right? Humans still shine when it comes to brain case size with about an 800 cc difference. Humans have an average of about 1,300 cc's. The biggest ape is going to be gorillas, and they're not getting past 500 cc's. Obligate bipedalism, of
Okay, before we get back into bipedalism, Peter, this is literally your line of expertise on the brain sizes. So, do you want to comment on that?
Well, the textbooks and people say there's no correlation between brain size and intelligence in modern humans, and there's some people have up to 2,000 cubic centimeters, maybe slightly more. The smallest I know of, which I'm talking about normal, not pathological. If you're pathological, you can go right down the scale. But normal intelligence, and that's something we know about. So if there's one, then there's probably more, and probably even lower. But there was a guy called Daniel Lyon who's worked in some job in a railway station or something in the US 100 or so years ago, and they worked at his brain volume or something was in the 600s. Anyhow, from the data, I was able to calculate his cranial capacity with, depending on which way you calculate it, was either 660 or 694 cubic centimeters. He had normal intelligence. The only thing they did a pathology report in his brain down. The only thing was different. His cerebral hemispheres looked normal, but the cerebellum was proportionally large. So his cerebral hemisphere was even smaller for even that cranial capacity. So because he had a almost normal size cerebellum. But the point is, a gorilla, I think it was Schultz that reported it, and found a gorilla cranial capacity of 752 cubic centimeters. So where there's one, there'd be more, and there's possibly larger brain size. So already you don't need to go to fossil record for overlap. You have it here, overlap, normal intelligent human and a gorilla. Now, let me read what the late Alan Walker said, because he sums it up, part of it. He says, this is quoting Alan Walker, "I can't believe that sheer brain size defines humaneness. All the rest of the cranial anatomy of 1470 says Australopithecus to me." That's talking about that, but then this is the next bit. If brain size is the sole criterion of humaneness, then at some brain size threshold, an ape in an animal body suddenly becomes a human in an animal body who is just waiting for the evolution of its trunk, arms, and legs to catch up and become a human too. So by the logic, if brain size or the overlap is that important, now if either the gorilla, even though it had a gorilla body, if it's so important, then shouldn't that have become a human in its thinking? Now, I don't know, that gorilla was probably measured 100, 150 years ago, the cranial capacity, but I presume it didn't show human thought and things like that. Now, or the person who had the smaller brains, like Daniel Lyon, less than the gorillas, he should start thinking like a gorilla. But no, he had normal human intelligence. So this thing about brains is bogus. This overlap and stuff like that, and also a lot of it's a huge range of like in humans, like I mentioned, a huge range of differences, and evolution is half on. There is no correlation between brain size and intelligence. So what's the selective value then? Because I worked out roughly the evolutionists estimate that every 100,000 years, if you average out, about 20 cubic centimeters have been added to the brain in evolution, which works out to be a few millimeter cubed or a few pinheads of brain tissue per generation per person. Well, what selective value, if you can have, if the difference in humans, say, but say two chimp-sized brains, difference in that, 1,000 mil between two humans makes no difference. Why would a few pinheads make a difference in selective value of the environment of evolutionary adaptiveness? So again, it's bogus, and particularly, and so how would it select for us? That's certainly a big problem. And the thing is, a lot of this again, I've gone to Homo habilis. A lot of the way they reconstructed it, Louis Leakey, Philip Tobias, they wanted their ape man, and like with STW 53 or whatever, they got when they first reconstructed it, Werner outlined his book. This is not habilis, is another one. The brain size was too small, so they got someone else to make it. Clark wouldn't reconstruct it. He said that's the way it is. So he got someone else to make it reconstructed to make a larger size brain because I needed that for the ape man. So a lot of this, so you can't take even the brain size measurements at face value, and so yeah. But I don't. I don't think this is about. And the thing is, she quotes the mean, but she doesn't quote the variability. Humans have a huge variability, and because apes, of course, apes, because they're smaller, you're not going to have that big range because you don't have as much to start with. The other thing I'd point out is it's not a quote. The formal robustness of the skull doesn't necessarily correlate with brain size. Some of the larger brain size fossils we found are the most robust, like the Land O'Lakes hominid in Australia is one of the most robust skulls in the fossil record. It has, I think the walls of its cranium is about a centimeters thick and has, receding forehead and all things, but everyone regards it as a modern human. It had to be, but basically, so that's one of the most robust skulls, and it had a cranial capacity of 1,540 cubic centimeters. That's 200 centimeter cubed above the average. Then you go to China, the Zhejiang skull, 1,800 cubic centimeters, and one of the reasons like that isn't put into erectus is because erectus is defined as a low brain size species. So if you get larger brain size, it's not going to fit into erectus. No, because that means it destroys their hypothesis that erectus was small in brain size. So it's sort of circular reasoning. And the Zhejiang cranium had a low cranial wall, had sort of brow ridges and things like that, expect from erectus. And maybe some things were a bit because it's so large, the sides of the cranium balloon out a bit, but that's just because of brain size expansion. When you have a large brain, a lot of the brain case is formed because of the brain expansion and stuff like that. Also, the growth of the face and the cranial base influences the form of the brain case, but it's a lot of the growth of the brain. So yeah, to me, it's not really that important, and but they harp on it because that's one of the few things that they have to harp on, so they harp on upon it. But I think it's a sort of false comparison. Take into the variability, and like I said, you have Daniel Lyon. This guy had a cranial capacity of 660 or 694, depending how you calculate it. That kind of means you already have overlap. Yet he was measured normal intelligence. So that kind of deflates their argument a bit. This overlap thing is not, he wasn't part ape. He was fully human, normal intelligence, and the gorilla size, which had a larger brain than him, I presume wasn't human in his thinking. I don't know because it was so long ago. Anyhow, that's the point I wanted to make.
Right. And Jerry, what is she kind of puts it in some sort of order, like she thinks it's transitional, like the brain is somehow, I guess, getting bigger with time, kind of thing. Because she assumes that the Australopithecines are transitional between the common ancestor of apes and or the alleged common ancestor of apes and humans. And so, what do you think about her putting this in this kind of sequence?
Well, that's pretty common. You say our ancestor had small brain, and as we evolved to modern humans, the brain became larger and larger until we have the size we have today. But of course, as well brought out by Peter, brain sizes certainly have disease cases of hyocephalicism and so on. But on the other hand, you have an enormous variation in brain sizes, and that doesn't always correlate with intelligence. Some people have small brains, very intelligent. Some people with large brains are not very intelligent. A study was done a few years ago of nuns who lived in a convent, and they died in their 80s and 90s. And they did autopsies, and they found most of them had major evidence of brain damage through various illnesses. And yet none of them showed any functional damage. They functioned quite well in their environment and didn't have any problems. So nonetheless, you show the brains to a doctor and say, well, it's clearly severe Alzheimer's disease. No question. Well, they didn't have Alzheimer's disease. And so this points out the fact that how they explain it, by the way, was that you lose brain tissue significant amounts, but other parts of the brain take over those functions compared to those that are lost. And so that's why they maintain pretty normal function until they died. They expected them to have Alzheimer's behavior and patterns, but it surprised them that they even had Alzheimer's disease, period, according to the brain dissection they did. And this was a study that, these 30, 40 years they spent doing this. And I think it was done in Chicago. And the evaluations were done by neurologists who were experts in the brain and could determine various traits which would indicate disease. And they found those traits which indicate disease, but when they evaluated the behavior of the people in the nuns, they didn't have the behavior that would correspond to what they expected when they evaluated the brain. So this is another example where brain size is not always very highly correlated with behavior or with intelligence.
Right. She seems to assume that because you can have variations in brain sizes of chimps and apes and primates, and that doesn't mean anything. You could put anything into some kind of order like that and try to argue for progression. But it doesn't prove progression. It just proves that there are variations, and you could have different australopithecines possibly that could have had different brain sizes. It's sit there and argue that automatically, if I put them in this order, in this order, in this order, in this order, and I get to the size of a human, anyone could do that, but it doesn't really prove that there's an actual progression there. It just proves that there are variations. You see variations today, like Peter said, and like you referenced, and so this is not uncommon. So, but anyone could sit there and put them in some kind of order and then claim transitionals. Claim that they're in some kind of a transitional form, moving up the ladder. And then, of course, there's this presupposition that assumes that they go from, I guess, being dumb to being more intelligent with brain sizes, and that, as Peter pointed out, that doesn't correlate. That brain size and intelligence don't necessarily work.
And
But all right,
and one other thing I know is that if one last point, if you go look at the World Health Organization record of goiter, was published in the mid-20th century, you find a lot of regions that a lot of these fossils are found are goiter regions. Like in the cradle of humankind, a goiter belt runs just just north of it, or within it, or just north of it. And where there's goiter, there's cretinism, and cretinism can reduce brain size by up to 50%. And cause all sorts of features, which, according to anatomist and evolutionist Charles Oxnard, the sort of primitive features in so-called evolution, he's an evolutionist, are mimicked in cretinism. So you have this to deal with as well. And in the Caucasus, where the Dmanisia erectus fossil find the small brain ones, that's another goiter region, and there's other places in Africa. So, and of course, Oxnard reckon Hobbit was a cretin, because you can't once you exceed the range of human variation, the brain body size scaling down, the brain doesn't scale down as much proportionally, so it's almost untenable. Say to have a 400 cubic centimeter get a normal brain of 400 cubic centimeters. The only way you get is you get into pathology then, and he believed cretinism could explain it. If you had sort of humans that are found, sort of really small brain humans of 8 to 100 cubic centimeters, which there are some with normal intelligence, if they had cretinism, then you could explain it. Well, and there's other pathologies as well, but yeah, one has to bear that in mind.
All right.
And if you have,
I'm gonna go ahead and move on, unless y'all have anything else to add.
Of course, humans move in a very weird way compared to all other living apes, so we should expect to see the emergence of the characteristics that facilitate our bipedalism show up through the fossil record. Now, humans and chimpanzees and all Miocene apes have the same bones and the same muscles, so we're just looking at a change in the shape of these bones and the size through time. Small canines. Humans compared to other great apes have itty-bitty canines, and apes generally, we have itty-bitty canines, right? And these canines are monomorphic, so they're the same size in males and females. This is typically not the case for the other great apes, but it is for us. We have a broad dietary niche and complex tools. So chimps use tools, and they use them to hunt, and they eat a lot of different things. But humans take that to the next level. So we should see an advance in tool use, and we should see an advance in the types of foods that hominids are eating through time.
The claim that
Canines,
chimps
she mentions
are
the
great.
canine teeth, that that they had similar canines, that small canines like we have. And then the second thing she mentioned is the use of tools and dietary. I guess, was she talking about dietary consumption or something like that? I can't remember, but
Just these
she
guys difference.
talked about their use of tools. Yeah, so y'all want to speak on that real quick? I didn't want to get too far ahead in her examples.
The use of tools in apes is pretty simple. There's a lot of difference between taking a rock and hitting a nut and taking the contents of the nut when you break the nut up, and between that and building a house or using
Right.
tools in order to create all kinds of incredible things. I am amazed that somebody can take a knife and a piece of wood and carve out incredibly accurate pictures of all kinds of things. And I don't know how they do it, but they do it. And we're not talking about fancy tools. We're talking about people have the skills to do that. Well, monkeys, the most they can do is very crude things using, well, like I say, I break open a nut. They take one rock, they hit the nut on another rock, then it breaks the nut open and they can eat the contents. It's very different than carving a human statue out of a piece of wood.
What do you think about her, Jerry, her claim that there's a progression there among tool use? It sounds like she's going to argue that as time went on, their tools became more sophisticated. What would be your response to her claim on that?
I thought most primates, at least the primates that can, walk on 4 feet and are somewhat humanoid, most primates, I assume, can use simple tools. I didn't know there was any, but they've found evidence of squirrels can use simple tools and break nuts against the trees. They can throw nuts against the trees. So I guess in some sense, many mammals use tools in that broad definition. But again, tool use, we're talking about enormous differences between what chimps and gorillas do and what humans do.
Yes. Peter, do you have any thoughts on those examples? They mentioned canine teeth. Do either of y'all have any kind of information on that regarding the size of the canine teeth? Do modern apes, for example, have those kinds of canine teeth, or what?
Well, I think the modern apes, they have larger canines, so the Australopithecines have less. But as far as I know, at least some of the Australopithecines have larger molars. So and so it's sort of like I said, if you get away from this thing that Australopithecines, they weren't apes as in modern apes, and you can look at the skulls, it's apish, but it's a kind of different form than. It's not a chimp skull. It's not a gorilla skull. It's not an orangutan skull. So, and that's again with Charles Ocknight analysis showed that these are unique creatures. They were kind of designed for an arboreal lifestyle. They were efficient at climbing trees, but also they could walk bipedally. But mechanically, they walked very different bipedally. I don't know whether it walked obliquely or not because there's still a lot of issues over their pelvis and whether it could actually support it. And a lot of times in modern apes they work orangutans, they walk bipedally in the trees on branches to reach fruit. So a lot of this stuff is designed for that. In fact, if you're going by the evolutionist thing about the environment they lived in, walking upright in savannah, well, it's a sort of like the predators around was a cornucopia of different predators, much worse than today. It's a wonder how anyone could survive in more than 5 minutes walking around there without being, devoured by some big saber-toothed cat or some dog or some creature, the sort of all sorts of predators. So how on earth, I don't know how you lose your ability to walk in the trees, to walk upright, and these people, these creatures, I mean, didn't have human intelligence. So I don't know how they would have survived very well, so to me it's sort of that's a problem too. How do they survive? And gradually becoming more and more human-like in their walking and losing the tree ability when when the environment they faces will be more and more hostile. And so and yeah, so yeah, I think that was any other point I was trying to make.
Finally, extended time to maturity. A lot of people don't know this, but humans take forever to grow up, and that is actually reflected in our physical morphology. So humans actually have 5 stages in our life history. We are infants, then we go through the childhood phase, then juveniles, then adolescents, and adults. But chimps only have 3: infant, juvenile, and adult. Those extra 2 stages, though, are marked by specific physical phenomena that show up in our morphology. So we should see the emergence of the human life history through time as well.
All right. That seemed like a really weak argument. For start with, how do they know how the Australopithecines grew in terms of their growth rate? How do they know? I mean, all you have is the fossils, which obviously would show what they look like when they died. But how would you know how fast they grew?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a lot of guesswork. I guess they look at the teeth and examine features on teeth and things like that. But it's a lot of guesswork. But I'd also argue that maturity in humans isn't necessarily exactly some people may, particularly in the past, may. I think one of the things that's why you see these robust, I call them robust humans with stronger features, stronger bones, is with a immaturity, but it's a main result of hormones and the release of hormones, different intensity, different duration, different frequency during development, may have caused some of these features, and which explains why you have really robust skulls like this. And if it changes the ratio of, say, how the cranial base grows with respect to the face, or how the brain slows one down and up the other, so to me, a lot of that may be it would be something programmed in design. Maybe in the pre-flood world there was you had I mean, if you believe the Bible, which I do, then you have to explain. People lived hundreds of years. Adam lived 900 years or something. A lot of others in the current body, the human body, physiologically, anatomically, wouldn't last that long. Something had to be different in a pre-flood world, and it seemed to have carried on the first few centuries after the flood. So that whether there was a link to some robusticity, which kind of coded for some of these different hormonal patterns, whether that also affected duration, maturity, I don't know. I don't believe the features are a result of really long delayed maturation or anything like that. But during development, you have these effects, and that probably explains a lot of this stuff. I mean, why you see these features, but and add to that the environment, exercise, things like that. You get all this variability, and but how they work it out from the fossils? Yeah, they'd have to look at the teeth and other things, and the fusion, like they look at the fusion of some of the bones and stuff like that.
Dr. Bergman, do you have anything to say on the idea of looking at maturity and progress and growth and that sort of thing, and assuming, because different organisms today grow at different rates. Dr. Lyon referenced different humans that might even mature differently and grow at different rates. So this idea that somehow, oh well, these right here grow faster than the previous ones, so therefore they must be on their way to becoming human. What do you think though of that idea?
Well, that's very specious. Most mammals, period, as soon as they come out of the birth canal, they can walk around. And maybe wobble for a while, but on the other hand, they can still walk. So we have a huge, 12 years, or I guess minimum 6 years before we can live on our own. So when we humans are born, we're helpless for months. For probably 2-3 years, we're helpless or largely helpless during the first year and a half. So I don't know that much about primates, but what I do know is that they are more like mammals than humans. They're not dependent upon their mother for 8 years like humans are. So there's a huge difference. And I don't know if there's any evidence for a continuum from being able to be on your own for the more advanced primates. So probably Erika would know more about that than I do, but I think that's pretty specious because there's a huge difference between us and all other animals relative to the ability to survive as soon as we're born.
Right.
So all these traits should show up in the fossil record, and we should see mosaics in mosaics, as in we should see transitional species that have transitional bones. The bones themselves need to be transitional. Luckily, it's very, very easy to identify all of these characteristics in the fossil record. Bipeds are super easy to identify. They have a forwardly placed foramen magnum, or a hole at the base of the skull. That's so that we can hold our head directly on top of our vertebral column and look all around. We have an inline big toe to sort of toe off as we walk, a bowl-shaped pelvis for anchoring powerful gluteal muscles and strengthening the pelvic floor, a valgus knee to keep our weight in line, and many, many more. We can see big brains by looking at skulls.
All right, she kind of just streamlined that, but essentially that's everything that we've already talked about. That you have to actually have to have the whole kit and caboodle. You can't just simply say, oh well, it's got some features in common, and therefore it's that. And what about the bowl-shaped pelvis? Me and you have talked about that before on previous videos. Dr. Line, what she says there. Now, of course, obviously, this is based on reconstructions of pelvis. Both Lucy's and our Ardipithecus was actually crushed, and so they had to reconstruct it and that sort of thing. But you actually showed me a reconstruction of Lucy's pelvis before, and it was not an exact bowl shape. You even put
No,
them inside each other, so you can kind of see that.
yeah, yeah. I got slides on it, but anyhow, yeah. There's some curvature, but it's not nowhere near what the human ones typically are. Now, you may get some humans that are less bowl-shaped too, but usually it's pathological or something like that. So you're just going by what the normal, typical human condition is. So they use the term flaring ilia for what you're talking about. That it doesn't curve around so much as the side of the body; it goes more sideways. So that means that the muscles that attach it to help balance the body during bipedal motion won't have the same orientation and give the same support as a human, and along with they like Lucy, because a lot of talk about Lucy. So they also looked at the sacrum of Lucy, and it has markings related to ligament attachment, the sacrotuberous ligaments on Lucy's sacrum. It binds the sacrum to the ischium, but when it stands up, it kind of helps the posture, the sort of the stabilize the sort of sacro ilia stabilization of the pelvis helps to kind of balance it if these ligaments are strong, so it doesn't wobble or things like that. And in humans, I have very strong ligaments there that assists it in keeping balance or whatever in an erect posture. But I found the markings of Lucy very weak. So that, again, that's an indication that when it standed upright, it probably wasn't that stable. And that with some of the Australopithecus had a really small sacral body, indicating that they weren't designed to bear as much weight as humans do, which means that likely they wouldn't have been walking around too much, because it would, they'd have really bad back problems. And so that's what I think. They're probably not obligatory. Well, again, obligatory, it's just in degrees, because what is obligatory? If they're spending most of their life or half of their life in the trees, and they walk when they sometimes go down it, does that mean they're obligatory? If they so it's just how you define it and whatever. And they're not. Then they wouldn't be able to run like humans, and people have analysed it, and they weren't endurance runners or anything like that. And and their ratio, the humeral-femoral ratio, was higher. So they're basically, because their legs are shorter, arms are longer. So it's a sort of different mechanics. And I think one of the things that Gutsick Gibbon gets onto is they're desperate for a foot that has the first ray, or the big toe aligning with the other toes, so they can show that the low trolley footprints weren't made by humans, but were made by, Australopithecines. And they have to basically go to South Africa to find one, not in Tanzania, Hada, where these footprints are. And I used a Littlefoot one, and she will argue that it was in line with other toes. The thing with that, though, is firstly, it was reconstructed divergently by Tobias and Clark, so they're experts at it. Although, so they believe it was divergent, and other aspects of the footprints were ape-like, and they found more footprints, some were ape-like. Now, the question is, there was the second metatarsal that was argued, now not by them but by others, that it sort of aligns with the first metatarsal. Therefore, the first ray must have been aligned, and therefore you had a big toe aligned the other toes. But it's a similar situation to with the OH8 foot, which I now believe belonged to robust Australopithecine, which originally was Homo habilis. But anyhow, whatever. Where our expert in the foot, Lewis, he argued basically that it could be not as divergent as a chimp, but it could still be divergent, because you have ligamentous material investing in it, surrounding it, upon it, which, so basically you could still reconstruct it. And remember, these foot bones, they're not found fossilized in articulation. These are, you have to put them together after they're fine, so there's a bit of room, for bigger room there. And if you add this ligamentous material, then it will still be divergent to some degree. And this Clark group, the Clark who found it, they've never said denounced the find. They never said, "Oh, we've changed our mind." And now it was basically fully in line. They never said that. That in fact, I compared it with the one of the what's it called, Bertel or foot or whatever, which did have a basically divergent opposable toe, and the Afarensis child, which also had a divergent first toe. So basically, and so it's sort of so that's their main evidence that the Afarensis had a sort of basically, or sorry, the Australopithecines had a toe in line with the others, big toe in line with the others, is based on the little foot, which can be basically, depending on, again, fossils can sing any song you want, basically. So there's different views. But my thing is that, like Tuttle, who examined the Laotoa footprints, argued you can't use Afarensis because it's too primitive to describe these footprints. Now, if these footprints had not been dated at 3.6 million years, but were, say, 2 million years younger, say at 1.6, they would be saying Erectus made them. That's I have no doubt about that. I can't prove that, but because it's 3.6, they can't say that. Then their evolutionary timeline collapses. And by the way, there is one skeleton, the Kadunumu skeleton, known as Big Man or whatever, codename KSDBP, 1.1, that was found, but it was found that was much larger, and it was found dated about 3.6 or just under 3.6 million years. So that's in Ethiopia, and basically, if you look at it, it's sort of very human-like in its features, but it hasn't got the feet, hand, and a skull. So it's open to subject interpretation. So they thrown it in as afferences, but I don't believe it is. And even some evolutionists don't really believe it belongs to afferences, but they won't say where it belongs. But because, and I can't say, they can't really say it's human because again, the story collapses. So there is some interesting finds there that maybe people aren't that aware of, but there is that skeleton of Cadnamu, which is a enigma in the evolutionary timeline. They say it's afferences, but there's no real proof. It's just their belief because it can't, because humans can't exist. Then they have to put it in afferences. There's no choice. And it's a bit of a long answer.
Right. Okay. The first thing I want to mention is the Laetoli footprint. She does mention that later. You just mentioned that, Peter, just a second ago. And she claims that this was transitional. They had chimps and humans walk alongside, and it's transitional. Is she's talking about degrees of divergent concerning the opposable toe? Is that how I'm understanding that?
I think the Laetoli foot, there's site G, I think it's site G and S. They seem to be pretty much fully human footprints to any unbiased observer. There is a recently, although these were found earlier, but they were kind of put it on the side, but recently reanalyzed the last few years, called Site A, and they're very different from Site G and S. They indicate footprints which have a divergent toe, and that sort of their apish footprints that are different from the others. I believe that could be an Australopithecine. You basically, but you have that alongside the, there's a different track. So that could be the Australopithecine ones, which explains you have Australopithecines and you have human, but they're not the same ones. They would say it's not afferences, but that's just again their belief. There's no, you can sing whatever song
Right.
you want, but yeah.
And like Prometheus, she refers to Prometheus as Africanus, but I think that's just because that some evolutionists argue for Africanus, some try to argue for Prometheus, but they're talking about the same thing, Littlefoot. And she claims it had an inline big toe. Now, of course, even if that was true, and it's actually not. To me, from what I understand, it's actually kind of semi-divergent, so it's not really like, it's still opposable.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly,
Yeah.
it's just not as opposable as modern apes, and so she's trying to argue for some kind of transitional there. But to me, the idea of inline big toe or opposable big toe, these are kind of like exact opposites from each other. So if even if it's semi-divergent, it's still not an inline big toe. Either way it goes.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It's not in line. It's the ones the Littlefoot would be semi-divergent, I believe, not like Jim, not fully, but semi. And remember, they were a unique package.
Right.
The big
All
thing
right,
that struck me,
go ahead. No, you
The
go
big
ahead.
thing that struck me is when she went through all these changes. Why? Why would they make a change? Is it a survival advantage? Is our prolonged infancy rate 4, 5, 6 years? Is that a survival advantage? No. Is it a survival advantage for us to be exclusively bipedal? No. It's a survival advantage to be bipedal sometimes, or at least partially, and be able to climb trees. So once we were bipedal, we could no longer escape by climbing trees as other animals can. So I would say many of the changes that she's proposing, number one, how do they occur? By, of course, genetic mutations is what they would argue. But indeed, can mutations cause these changes? Number one. Number two, are they a survival advantage? Is the changes as a whole allow the creature, us in this case, to be better able to compete with other animals? And of course, in many cases, it doesn't. So once you lack a mechanism to go from one to the other, in many ways, all you're doing is lining up what exists. And that doesn't prove anything except that these animals, these creatures existed, but it doesn't, by evolutionary standards, it doesn't prove survival of the fittest and the origin of new information by genetic mutation. So basically the point of evolution is not there.
Right. Absolutely. So basically, her entire case did not make the conclusion she was trying to argue for, because even if they were bipedal, that would not equal humanity. And since modern day primates have some similar features to bipedalism, otherwise they would not be able to walk upright at all. But they're not. They don't got the full anatomy that would be required to be bipedal fully like us. It's more in a very limited sense. And of course, also
Well, need,
piscines
need
could
to
have
do it.
been
Need to
a
do a
little bit better.
Straupificines. Need
Right.
to do a Straupificine. Yeah. So that they don't have the full features either. So just a very
No,
you're
no.
just looking variability there of
Right.
within the primates, non-human primates, there's variability in bipedality, and even in existing apes, you have variability. The gibbons are more bipedal, are better suited for it than the like chimps are. So if they're arguing for bipedality, they should say gibbons are closer to this common ancestor, but they won't do that. It's
Right.
genetically much further away on the evolutionary tree, isn't it?
Right. So I'm going to take this opportunity to get you two guys to talk about your overall impressions with the video. I know we dealt with a lot of specifics and that sort of thing, and that's good. But what, in terms of your takeaway from Erika's case, and also everything that you Dr. Bergman, you and Erika had discussed, and during the course of the debate, uh, what was your impression? And Peter, you watched this debate all the way through, and so just kind of give me your overall impressions of it. What do you think of what Erika was trying to do? Erika was trying to show alleged transitional fossils here, trying to show order of brain sizes, trying to show bipedalism, things like that. What was your takeaway concerning Erika's case and that sort of thing?
Okay, my basic perception is that
Or
she strongly, am I okay now? She strongly believes in evolution, and as
yes,
a result, she saw evolution in this what she called evidence. But she looked at these conclusions or this data to support her belief. So the belief came first, then she looked for evidence to support that belief. What it should be is the evidence comes, then from the evidence you arrive at a belief. And she did the opposite way, but of course that's typical of evolutionists. That's how they reason. They believe it and
right.
they find evidence to support it.
Go ahead, Peter. What's your impressions of it?
Well, I think Jerry made the point that evolution cannot occur during a debate. There's no mechanism for it. So the first thing they should ask is it even possible? But they don't ask that, like it says, they assume it happened. And then she's very knowledgeable. She's very good at putting a evolutionary spin on the evidence. And so she sort of if you're talking to people who don't have much knowledge about this, most people don't. They don't have time to research the evidence. It sounds very convincing, and that's the thing. But if you start going through it, then it's not so convincing. And the thing is that it isn't even possible genetically. If you look at the waiting time problem to getting all this information fixated in the genome, it's not possible. And the and the thing is that the bones are the easiest things because basically because as I mentioned before, bones are fickle. They can sing any song you want. But if you go and start talking molecular biology, DNA, the function of the brain, that's when evolutionists, they can't wiggle as much because it's just you have the most complex arrangement of matter in the known universe inside your head, with almost infinite functional complexity, and that's the real evidence for creation. And it has to be programmed in a DNA to create it. First, to build it is a bigger problem in itself, but then it has to function. And then you have one thing I didn't mention about, I should have mentioned about the brain. What is different between why you can have an ape brain and a human brain the same size, and why the ape isn't human, the human is an ape? Because two things. One is the brains in humans are organized differently, that the hardware is different, but also the software. And this is why neuroscience can't find the link between a brain activity and cognitive thinking, because in the words of Michael Egnor, a neurosurgeon, we have a spiritual soul which is immortal, and that's our mind or ghost or machine, whatever you want to call it, and it's not physical. You can't describe it in laws of physics, and it can't even evolve with something physical. And unless you have that, you're not a human. And that's really, of course, modern science won't acknowledge that. But that, to me, that's the two of the main differences. Why? Organization of the brain.
Right. I think what a lot of the times evolutionists can come off really convincing to a creationist because they're so confident that they're right, and that they don't know. And sometimes people just don't know how much interpretation goes into it, how much reconstruction goes into it, how much, and sometimes they're limited on their knowledge of modern primates. They're limited on their knowledge of Australopithecines, or a combination of the two. And so and like you said, is a fear of, oh no, we can't have any bipedal features in primates, or even similar ones. And it's like, okay, you need a lot more than a frame and magnum being forward anterior to make it walk upright to begin with.
That's why at the end of the Is Lucy a Human Pygmy presentation, I put up a video of a gibbon running and then walking almost like a human. And just to say, remove the fear of bipedalism. That no one believes that's a human or ape man. Yet there you go. Much better than a chimp. Maybe better than Lucy. I don't know. So,
all right, it's getting late as it is, even over my area. So we're gonna go ahead and call it quits. Do you all have any final words to say before we let go?
This is quite an area, and my problem was I knew a lot about Australopithecus, etc., but I'm not up to date. And so, it's really a full-time job to keep track of all this stuff. And so that's why I thought it's not a good idea that I spend too much time, although I've done PowerPoints and so on that. So I have a good knowledge, but I'm not up to date. And I think you're better off just covering areas that you think are more important than trying to go in the minutiae details about Australopithecus or whatever they're talking about. But anyway,
there's one more thing I wanted to, right. There's one more thing I was going to ask you about, Jerry, real quickly. She mentioned, she later on in the debate, she tried to deny the idea that there were debates among evolutionists on these topic matters. And she said, well, some will say that it's 50% in the trees, and it's just really the amount of how much they bipedal. And I'm sitting there thinking, how is that different from modern day primates exactly? Because you got some that could walk better in trees and along branches than on the ground, and you got some that can, so it's like, okay, how's that really different? And if it's not 100% upright like we are, then by definition they don't classify as bipedal, because it's got to be able to walk upright, upright type of posture, right, to be considered bipedal officially. As far as the official definition of bipedal, it can have some limited attributes to bipedalism, but it's to be considered bipedal per se.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let all you guys know. I've got a dog that wants my attention. So.
All right, we're going to go ahead and end the discussion anyhow. Thank y'all for joining me. Thank you, Dr. Lyon. I appreciate it very much. And I will see y'all next time. And thank you for joining me on this debate review.
Good.
All right.
See you later.
God bless.
Okay.
God bless.
Bye.
God bless.
Bye.
Thank you for watching Apologetics 101, and thank you for watching this epic debate review with Dr. Jerry Bergman and Dr. Peter Line. I was so happy to have them on. This was a great discussion. We covered a lot of stuff, and how Erika is approaching this was a big issue. And it was something that I also had because the way my impression was in this debate was that it would, if someone has never actually took the liberty of actually examining these fossils, or realizing that Erika is basing her claims, which she's very confident and very dogmatic on. um, I think Dr. Rob Carter pegged her correctly when he referred to her as overconfident. Because I think there's nothing wrong with confidence, but I think Erika tends to be overconfident, and she jumps the gun when she is overconfident, and that gets the better of her, and she tends to do that. She'll be overconfident, but here's the thing: that overconfidence can actually be very persuasive to somebody that does not know the evidence, does not know the facts, has never actually researched these fossils to see how much actual fossils they actually found. What is the actual evidence? What is the actual interpretation of the evidence? What is them reconstructing the fossils based on their interpretations? And what worldviews are going into their interpretations, what's filtering their perception, etc. And these things are important to note. And I think a lot, and it gets lost in this debate because Erika's very confident that the reconstruction is accurate, that she's very confident that this is really true, and she'll voice it that way to the point where it sounds like it's an absolute fact, when in fact, it's not in fact, it's just their interpretation of the evidence, and even that is based on their interpretation, reconstruction of the evidence, which is also based on interpretation of the evidence. So you still wind up coming down to a bunch of assumptions that are being applied to the arguments. In reality, I don't think that bipedalness, as we talked about in the video, bipedality is equals humanity. Um, Something can be bipedal and not be human, or transitional to human. Um, Apes have various positions when it comes to their foramen magnum. I don't know why that would be an issue. Like, oh, well, the foramen magnum is in between, and so therefore it's transitional. It's like, no, there are apes alive today with those kinds of positions of foramen magnum. Um, and even if it was more forward than typical modern apes, this wouldn't matter either because it would just mean that they could walk upright a little bit better than modern apes, maybe to some extent, uh, but it wouldn't be exactly the same as humans. They have to possess a lot of different characteristics to be bipedal like us, including having a rib cage that is barrel shape, not uh, uh, a cone shape. A cone shape rib cage would be like a funnel shape rib cage where it kind of broadens out and it kind of goes down smaller to a smaller waist. And that kind of rib cage is designed for quadrupedal movement. It's not designed for bipedal movement, except maybe if you have certain features in common bipedal, maybe to a limited extent, the way we see apes today. It's quite possible that Australopithecines could have been a little bit more uh, bipedal than that of modern apes, but not to the extent that humans were. And that's important to note. Um, but we also have to be careful, as Dr. Line pointed out, not to be so fearful of bipedality to the point where it's like, oh, well, these can't be bipedal at all, and to any extent, because that doesn't really equal being human to begin with. Birds are bipedal. Some dinosaurs were bipedal. That's not really something that equals being human. Um, and apes today, modern primates today, are have limited access to bipedality to some extent. So there is going to be some similarities with them where they could be able to stand upright or move for a certain distance. Some of them are going to be better equipped at walking along branches and things like that. And there's no problem with that. If Australopithecines were like that, or even better than apes in that department, that's fine. Um, I'm okay with that, and I think we should all be okay with that. But for Erika to take it one step further and think that that automatically means that they were bipedal like us, I think Dr. Bergman said that Erika is arguing that they are effectively bipedal, that they are efficiently walking in a bipedal manner, very similar to the way we walk today. And that's just not the case. They don't have all of the characteristics. There's also questionable stuff in some of the things that they are being claimed, like inline big toe, for example. A lot of times it's divergent or semi-divergent, which means it's still posable. It's still designed like an ape's to grab a hold of branches and for arboreal tree climbing. And there's other aspects of them. There are definitely arboreal that's even in the reconstruction, like longer arms, curved fingers, things like that. They are equipped for designed specifically for tree climbing, and so their feet are probably going to be designed to tree climb. Even if their feet wasn't as equipped for tree climbing as say modern day apes, their feet are still equipped for tree climbing and that sort of thing. And uh, additionally, that their hip structure and pelvis often are found crushed and often have to be pieced together. A good example of that would be Lucy, but an even better example of that would be Ardipithecus remedis, which the hip of the Ardi, well, what they call Ardi, was found in like over 50 different pieces, and they had to reconstruct it based on, they used a computer software to reconstruct it based on modern human and modern chimp anatomy and assuming transitional bipedalism. So there's a question of how much you can really trust the reconstruction process since they're based on evolutionary interpretations on top of that. A lot of times the skulls are missing all the important areas relating to the frame magnum, so there's questions of interpretation as far as where the frame magnum was, but because a lot of times the skulls are being reconstructed. Um, but even if you have a few features like that of bipedality, you need all of it, and we just happen to know that there are certain ones that doesn't have for sure, even beyond interpretation. Like I said, they clearly don't have the rib cage for walking upright like us, to having an upright posture. Um, so more than if you got apes, primates today that have nearly forward facing framing magnum, not quite as forward as ours, of course, but somewhat, you know, uh, and with various locations, I don't see any problem with Australopithecines also having similar things. That does not mean that they walk like us. So we have to keep that in mind. So I didn't find Erika's case very convincing. If anything, I found her case to be very misleading. And I questioned. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this review, is because I questioned whether or not if Erika's arguments would actually get to somebody who's never actually studied the evidence, who's never studied what interpretations go into the evidence, may not be aware of the kinds of conditions these fossils are actually found in. I get that Erika, she's in a formal debate. She's timed. She has to streamline a lot of these arguments. She can't go into a whole lot of explanatory comments like you can during a lecture or something. But at the same time, you can also see. So I could provide Erika some leniency as a result. But at the same time, you can see how this could come off as misleading to other people who may not realize what exactly goes into these interpretations or evaluations or arguments or that sort of thing. And they may not realize that it may not be as clear cut as being made out to be by Erika. Well, anyway, thank you for joining me on here. I appreciate your taking the time to watch this video. I know it's been a long one, a couple hours long. Originally, I was thinking about doing it as a series. I said, nah, let's just do it, with us having just deal with Erika's opening case. I was going to do all of it. I was afraid I was going to run out of recording time in StreamYard. We also had we had a late start to begin with, but we also had some technicality issues as well, and so we had a time getting there. But once we got there in StreamYard, everything worked out okay. In fact, I think it worked actually better doing the debate review in StreamYard. I might employ that more often to do some of my recordings. We had issues out of Zoom for some reason, trying to Peter couldn't hear the video when it was played, and we tried to get him to share the screen. Maybe that would have helped, but then I couldn't hear it, and he could hear it, but I couldn't. Whenever I played it, I could hear it, he couldn't. So I don't know if there's a problem with my Zoom settings or his Zoom settings or what went on. I have to test that, at least on my end, to see if there's some kind of issue there. Just so that I can be able to, do that in the future and make sure that it is recording the sound. But despite the technicality issues, the fact that Jerry was really, really late coming there, I think he had some issues going on. I don't know what they were, but he came there late, so we had a late start and we had technicality issues. But despite all of that, it went really good. We had lots of great discussions, and it did exactly what I thought it would do. That we would complement each other and be able to, where each of our knowledge is lapsing, the others would make up for it, and it just basically worked out really well for a debate review. I'm hoping to do more debate reviews like that because that was actually pretty cool, and it actually worked really well. And so I was really happy with the end result of it. I was afraid, since I wasn't used to using StreamYard and I hadn't tested anything on StreamYard because it was kind of a last minute, last second decision to use StreamYard because of the technicality problems we were having. And so I ended up using StreamYard last minute, and I was afraid that, oh no, one of when I share screen, it had messed up or something. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it actually did pretty good. It actually worked really well. I apparently made the right options when I did the share screen. Everything went good. I actually had longer recording time than I thought. I probably could have sat there and did the rest of the opening case if I wanted to, but I was just afraid that it was going to run out of time, and I didn't want it to just kick us all off or stop recording right there in the middle or something. But any given case, it actually worked out really great. I was really happy with the end result. Please drop me a comment below. Let me know what you think as well. This has been a great review, and I love doing it. Thank you, Donnie, for allowing me to do this review of this discussion. He thought it was a great idea for us to get together and do this interview. So thank you again. And of course, I appreciate all that the critics do, to make this happen. And, Erika was willing to sit there and go into a debate with Dr. Jerry Bergman, and Dr. Bergman was willing to debate her as well. And so I'm glad that debate happened. Unfortunately, I guess as a result, as an effect of the way formal debates are, it's very hard to really get in there and understand what's really happening unless you go and research it yourself and look at the fossils and see the evidence and see what they're actually saying about the fossils, see what's actually being done about the fossils and what conditions they're found in, and that sort of thing, what interpretations go into it. All of these things are very important. and they need to be addressed. And unfortunately, it's just hard to address all that in a formal debate. So I understand Erika's predicament. She can't exactly, lecture everybody about every last little minute detail, but at the same time, I did want other people to know what is actually going on there, and so that people can be aware of it and maybe even do their own research, prompt them to do their own research. And of course, we have the time to actually discuss these things too, right? They don't really have the time to go into a whole bunch of explanations of what's going on there. And so, but we do. And so that's great that we could take the time to actually take a closer look at what's really going on here. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe. I make videos on general apologetics, but I've been really focused on last couple years on biblical creationism, Genesis topic matter, and other types of top matters related to Genesis. And so please subscribe to my channel. I plan on I've got two series that's out currently ongoing. The Genesis series and the RE8 series. The RE8 series is fixed to end in the month of August. It's already planned out. I already got the interviews scheduled and everything. I've got another interview this coming Wednesday with Ben Kissling on theistic evolution. This is going to be another interview or video for the Genesis series. I've also got another video that I just dropped a trailer for a mini series that I'm going to have in this month, the month of June, on the Tompkins controversy revisited. So I really like that title. I really like that the fact it's my first ever mini series. Usually I have series on here, not mini series, but I already had a Tompkins controversy series on here, 14 episodes long. But I wanted to revisit that in light of a new paper, a new study that came out, peer-reviewed study in Nature that discussed had about 12 to 27% differences between 6th grade apes, including chimpanzees, and humans, and testing with the fully sequenced ape genomes against the fully sequenced human genome, T2D. And so that's overturned the 96% number now. And so it's great to echo Donnie Badinsky saying from Standing for Truth, it is a great time to be a biblical creationist for sure. And I can't wait to have that. Erika dropped a new video. I know that Dr. Joel Duff has been dropping a couple videos, and so I'm going to probably be responding to them as well as going over all the stuff that happened during the Tompkins controversy, including all the reveals and things like that. And so that's going to be awesome. Also, don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Okay, subscribe to my channel, give the video a thumbs up. That helps the YouTube algorithm promote the video, get the video out to more people. We want that to happen, right? So make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, and make sure you stick around for more. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you can be alerted by YouTube. All right, my voice is about cracking, so I'm going to have to get going. But thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.